Hey, Guy. No, it's Haggai. We are talking about week 3 of the minors. Aaron and I are joined by Patric Earnest, who's a board member.
I'm a board member.
And
that sounds like grumbling.
I'm grumbling. I'm sorry I ruined your intro.
You're fine. No, I'm using it.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
What else would you share about yourself for those who don't know you?
I've been married to my wife Donna for 15 years now. I've been a member of Element, well, almost from the beginning. It was the first.
Can you tell you that story of that? Because I love this story.
So
Element starts and this guy's like, good for them. I'm never gonna touch foot in there.
That wasn't the case.
That was the case.
No. Well, it wasn't. I mean, I told Marianne, if you ever start something, call me. I'd love to help. Right. And so it's your first Easter Sunday, and you ask us to
Good Friday.
Good Friday. Yeah, asked me to stop by and help out with a skit. It was
a funeral.
It was a funeral for Jesus. Yeah. That's right. And so Don and I are down in Santa Barbara doing something else, and we're trying to get back, and we're stuck in traffic. And they were doing road work on the 101, and I remember she's on the phone with you back and forth. Where you at? Are you going to make it in time? And sure enough, we get there just in time, and it was at E1 when they still had the small offices in the back.
Oh, yeah.
And so Don and I walked in, and we step in the back, and my part is of a centurion who saw Jesus die and realized that he was a true God. Mm-hmm. And so as we sneak in the back, I'm wearing a black jacket and black pants, so nobody really sees me. And when it was my turn to come out, it was something to the effect that, I know I shouldn't be here, but...
And everyone's like, who's this guy that just showed up?
Yeah. So the guy sitting next to me jumps out of a seat, and then I see somebody else like, no, it's okay, you can sit down. It's like, and then I have to follow through with the lines like, oh, he's part of the skit. Yeah.
It's always the best way when it's like works out.
Oh, yeah, nobody had any clue what was going on.
Yeah.
And then so that was the first time I came to Element, and then we came to Sunday service, and we've been a member ever since.
Mm-hmm. Oh, because we invited you to do a skit.
Exactly.
Excellent. Well, very cool. So Aaron, would you mind giving a recap?
Today we come to Haggai in the Old Testament prophet, minor prophet. And he is one of the last 3 prophets that really come to Israel. Israel has returned from their captivity in Babylon, and they are supposed to be rebuilding their temple. And as they go to rebuild their temple, they get an altar, they get a foundation, and they just give up, and they start to go build their own houses. And what he does when he speaks to them is say, what are your priorities? Where does your faith actually lie? And he says in 38 verses, 4 times he will say, consider your ways. Consider why you do what you do. You are making really nice things for your own houses, and yet the house of God still lies in ruins. Why is that? And this is almost 20 years since the Israelites have returned and started to rebuild their temple. After he prophesies and speaks the things that he does, Israel really takes it to heart, and within 4 years they rebuild that temple. But his words are good for all of us, because we need to consider our ways. What are our priorities? Is our priority ourself, or is it God's glory and what he is doing in our lives? And that's essentially what the book centers around.
So you mentioned Patric in the middle of your message, wanting to bring him up. Why did you want to bring him up? Because
Patric is somebody who tends to give, and we've talked about this multiple times now, that you're someone who's always like, man, I can't give, I got too many things going on, but I'm going to do it anyway. And you say every time you do, God comes through. Not that you give to get, but you're always talking about how God just is so faithful when you decide to be generous like he called you to.
Typically, yeah. And usually it's when I really don't want to. You know, when I'm thinking that I don't have enough time or enough means to do it. And then I follow through, and then blessings do come. I mean, not automatically, but they do come.
You don't go home and there's not a check in your mailbox for like what you just gave.
It's happened once, but not every time.
So it has happened.
It can happen, but it doesn't happen all the time.
So give me an example, like one of the most amazing times that kind of happened, where you're like, man, I don't feel like I can give, and I'm going to give anyway because I know God calls me to, and then you do, and then God just does some amazing thing on the backside.
It's when I first started giving. It's you know, it goes many years ago. It was a Larry Burkett. He had a one-page flyer said, "When in debt, start giving." And I've gone through,
not on your credit card giving, but
no, just start giving when you're in debt. And I'm like, yeah, right. How you don't give when you're in debt? I can't even afford to pay for lunch today, much less give. And I just felt convicted that after I read it, you know, it talked a little bit about in Malachi where it says, you know, test me. It's the only place in the Bible where God says test me. And so it wasn't much. I think it was like probably $20 a week or something like that. I just didn't have it. And where I really saw the blessing was at the end of the year. I saw what I had actually earned versus what I actually had given, and that the in-between times weren't nearly as difficult as it had been. So at that point, then I said, okay, this is working. And so then slowly but steadily started increasing that over time. So,
do you think sometimes that's also a different perspective as well? Because sometimes when we decide to give, we think, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to give up something else over here. If I'm going to put God first, then I'm going to give up a little bit of me over here. And maybe we start to spend less in other places because we are centered more upon who He is.
I think that's part of it. I really do. But I also...
it's okay to disagree with me.
I know who I am. I mean, sometimes I'm like, well, why should I give that away? I can keep it in my pocket. Or I want to be in control of everything. Realistically, God's in control of the whole situation.
But you know, it is interesting that I mean, because yes, we all like to be in control of things, but you are someone who tends to give a lot from the outside looking in. You tend to look at people who have needs or things, and you tend to notice those things, and you tend to want to give, which is kind of cool. Was there something that kind of brought that about for you that made you begin to see things that way?
I think it was learned. I think it was learned along the path of when I started giving in the beginning, and then found other means, and then as I gave, and as my financial situation became better, not necessarily from giving, but as my financial situation became better and better, and going through difficult times, and kind of being a transplant on the Central Coast. I didn't have family, so we were by ourselves, or I was by myself, and really nobody there to fall back on. And so I just felt that it's kind of like that. There was a movie, Pay It Forward, but I just enjoy giving. I just enjoy helping people, you know. And I don't think people want a handout. I think they just want a hand up every now and then, you know, just a little bit of help. So.
Did you ever have a time where somebody helped you? Maybe you weren't looking for it or even wanting it, but someone helped?
Yeah, you know, it wasn't asked, but you know, I had a friend of mine that, you know, sent me, you know, some money when I was going through a difficult time, and I never asked for it, but it was just something that was sent in the mail. I was here, maybe this will get you by, and that was a learning process too, to be humble. To learn how to be humble and realize God's in control of all of it. He's in control of all. We say it's our money, it's not. We can't take it with us. It's His money.
Well, and I think that kind of leads. So the question you have in the handout is consider your ways in terms of your faith and priorities. What do they reveal as the center of your worship?
It's I give my first, my best to God, which for me is a minimum 10%, and then I am also looking for other ways to give as well. I had a friend that I knew was kind of struggling, and so I sent him a few $100 over Venmo, and just out of the blue, and sends a thing back that says, "Oh, when do I got to pay you back for this?" And I'm like, "You don't have to pay me back for this. This is I felt God was calling me to do this thing, and so I did it. And then I gave some money to somebody else. Like government stimulus comes, and I gave it away because I didn't keep it because it's, you know, one, I'm on a budget, and our budget works out a certain way, so I'm okay without it. And then so I get the surplus, and so first off, I give to God off of the first fruits of it. But then it's like, where can I bless and help other people with it? And then I do that, trusting God in what we do.
Yeah, and then I have to catch myself when I'm not trusting. Mm-hmm. I have to catch myself when I start worrying.
So you got to consider your ways.
Exactly. You know, I'll sit there and I'll start worrying about something and ruin a weekend, and it's like, no, just sit back and it's hard. Mm-hmm. It's hard.
Yeah, I think when you get to a place where you're not just spending everything on yourself, and you're looking for ways to be hospitable and always be inviting people in. I mean, that's a form of worship. I mean, it's what God called his people to. For all those feast days every year, it's like, bring everybody together and have a feast, and you guys don't know how to have a party, so give me the money, and I'm gonna have my priest put this together, and I'm gonna make these festival days for all of you, because we don't do it well. And so God's like, I'll do it well. I'll tell you what to do. I think today there's a lot of people in churches who would be highly offended at how God had his people eat and drink and be merry for like a week long. It's like, oh my goodness, what do we do with that?
As long as it's centered on him, right?
Right.
I mean, and so,
Right.
I mean, because that could go.
Well, yes, it can. But I think God does it because he wants his people to have this joy and be thinking the entire time, this is what our God has brought. Our God has brought us to a place to celebrate and have joy with one another and get to know each other. Man, God is good. And sometimes when people think, worship is just this quiet solitude, which it can be. It's singing these songs, which it can be. But it's also that gathering and joy that comes from fellowship with other people.
So, I mean, ultimately, it's a response of who God is and what he has done.
Right.
And so you can celebrate that in a celebration with others. You do it with money, like you see that it's not my money, it's God's money that he's imparted with me, and kind of time and investing with others, opening your home. Like hospitality is a huge part of God's heart. And I think the more we become like them and we imitate him, hopefully the more worshipful we are, because it's who he is and what he calls us to.
That was really Donna's doing. I mean, she truly does have a heart for the hospitality. Sometimes, you were talking a couple weeks about the grumbling under your breath. Yeah, that was me quite a bit. It's like, sure, fine.
People in my house was okay.
But then, when you can step back and people are having a grand time and having a really good time, and then they may be looking forward to it again.
If it draws people back to say, man, this was great. Look how God has drawn us together. That's worship. That's an intent for us to see the goodness of God in the things that he places into our hands and our lives.
Consider your ways in terms of your faith and your priorities. What do they reveal at the center of your worship?
Are we prioritizing what God is calling us to, or are we prioritizing ourselves first? Which one is it? And that's why we're to consider, I think, our ways, how we live, what we do, and come back to a place where we stop focusing and making everything about ourselves and begin to put it back towards who he is, because then that will then lead into worship and the proper things in our lives.
So if someone has done that and they see an area where they could use growth, how would you encourage them to turn and to try to give a first fruits and whatever that area is?
I really believe some people don't understand the whole idea of tithing, or a tenth or a tithe or whatever that breaks down into being. A tithe was a tenth in the Bible, or giving. And it's hard. I mean, it really is hard. When I first started giving, it was really hard. When I met Donna, I told her what I was doing, and she just kind of looked at me like, you're insane. And I explained to her some of my experiences with tithing, and she didn't have a whole lot of money in her checking account, and she went home and she wrote a check for $50. They're like, okay, we're going to trust you.
I know there's other people, who give and they don't see that. That's you don't give to get. I mean, that's what we're talking about. But it's a heart issue of generosity, and I think that what you said is true. It's you share your personal story.
But it always works out. It always works out, and that's the thing that astonishes me every time. It always works out, even in the bleakest of times. I mean, I remember when we bought the house that we're in today. That was 2008. Things were really tough, and my income was really low, and Donna wasn't doing so hot, and somehow we managed through.
So this week, we encourage you to try to find ways to give of your first fruits, whether it is financially, tithing, giving, or whether it is having somebody who needs just a pick-me-up, invite them over to your home, show them hospitality, feed them, meet some of their basic needs. And as you're reflecting, stop and consider your ways and your priorities and where they have been and what God might be calling you to shift, and how you can begin to live a little bit more in faith in what God has entrusted you. With that, we'll see you next week.
Could use a little bit more emotion, though.
Haggai!
Vein popped out of here.
Kind of scary. Don't get you angry.
Consider your ways.